I never thought the day would come when my own son would look me in the eyes and call me a burden. But there I sat in the mansion his father built, watching Ryan slide divorce-worthy paperwork across my dining table while his wife smirked like she'd already won. He'd sold everything, or so he thought. What he didn't know was that I'd been 3 steps ahead for years. If you want to see how a mother's quiet revenge unfolds, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far the story travels. The mahogany clock in the entrance hall struck 3 when I heard Ryan's BMW pull into the driveway. I'd been sitting in the study for the past hour, hands folded on the desk that used to be David's, watching dust particles float through the afternoon light. Funny how you can feel betrayal coming before it even walks through the door. I'm not a dramatic woman by nature. 68 years on this earth taught me that hysterics accomplish nothing, that quiet observation reveals more than 1,000 confrontations ever could. But something in my chest tightened when I heard 2 car doors slam instead of 1. Ryan never brought Vanessa to our monthly lunches anymore. Not since the wedding 6 months ago. The front door opened without a knock. Of course it did. This was still his childhood home, even if he hadn't lived here in 15 years. Mother? Ryan's voice echoed through the hallway. That particular tone, the one that sounded like he was doing me a favor just by showing up. In the study, I called back, keeping my voice level. Their footsteps approached. Vanessa's heels clicked against the marble with that sharp, aggressive rhythm I'd come to recognize. She walked like someone who wanted you to know she was coming, like she owned every room before she entered it. Ryan's gait was heavier now than it used to be. All those business lunches were catching up with him. They appeared in the doorway together, and I took them in the way I'd learned to observe people over decades of watching my husband's business partners lie to his face. Vanessa wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my housekeeper's monthly salary. Her dark hair was pulled back so tightly it looked painful. Ryan had his father's build, tall, broad-shouldered, but none of David's warmth. His eyes were harder now, colder. Or maybe I'd just been too busy missing my husband to notice when our son had stopped being kind. "We need to talk," Ryan said, not bothering with pleasantries. "No, how are you feeling? No, the garden looks beautiful. Just straight to business. Please sit down." I gestured to the chairs across from the desk. Vanessa sat first, crossing her legs with the kind of precision that felt rehearsed. Ryan remained standing for a moment, and I saw him glance around the study, at the shelves filled with David's books, at the photographs on the wall, at the antique globe in the corner. Was he cataloguing? Appraising? "I'm not going to sugarcoat this, Mother." Ryan finally took a seat, but he perched on the edge like he couldn't wait to leave. "Things have been difficult since Dad passed. The company's been struggling. The company has posted record profits for 3 consecutive quarters," I interrupted quietly. I'd been reading every financial report that came across my desk, even though Ryan thought I'd stopped paying attention years ago. His jaw tightened. "The publicly available numbers don't tell the whole story." "Don't they?" Vanessa leaned forward and I caught a whiff of her perfume, something expensive and aggressive, like everything else about her. "Mrs. Mercer, what Ryan's trying to say is that running a multi-million-dollar corporation requires difficult decisions. Decisions that sometimes older family members don't fully understand." Older family members. The words landed exactly as she'd intended them to. "I see." I folded my hands on the desk, the same way I used to when interviewing candidates for department head positions, back when I was still pretending to be just David's supportive wife instead of the woman actually running half the operations. Ryan pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, then set it face down on the desk between us. "I've made an executive decision regarding the company's future," without consulting me. "Mother, you're not on the board anymore. You haven't been actively involved in operations for 7 years," I finished for him, "since your father had his first stroke." "Yes, I'm aware." "Then you understand that this is really my call to make." He reached into his briefcase, a leather Brunello Cucinelli that I'd given him for his 40th birthday, and pulled out a manila folder, the kind that holds life-changing documents. My heart was beating faster now, but I kept my breathing steady. I had spent 3 years preparing for this moment, running through every possible scenario with Leon, my attorney. Leon, who Ryan thought was just some old family friend, who handled my personal paperwork. Leon, who'd actually been David's secret weapon in every major negotiation since 1987. "I've sold the company," Ryan said. Just like that. 5 words. 43 years of David's life, condensed into a single sentence and delivered with less emotion than someone ordering coffee. I didn't react. Not outwardly. I'd learned from David that the person who controls their emotions controls the negotiation. To whom? My voice was steady. A consortium of investors. They made an incredible offer, far beyond market value. It would have been financially irresponsible to turn it down. "How much?" I asked. Vanessa's smile widened. $47 million. She said it like it was an obscene amount of money, and to most people it would be. But David's company, the real company, the one with all its assets and holdings, was worth closer to $300 million. If Ryan had only gotten $47 million, then he'd sold something that wasn't actually his to sell, which meant my preparations hadn't been paranoid after all. They'd been necessary. "The sale closed yesterday," Ryan continued, sliding the folder across the desk toward me. "These are the final documents. I need you to sign them. Just formality, really, since the deal's already done. But the lawyers want all family members on record as having been notified and in agreement." I opened the folder slowly. Page after page of dense legal text, full of wherefores and heretofores and parties of the first part. The kind of language designed to make people's eyes glaze over so they just sign at the bottom and trust that everything was in order. But I'd been reading contracts since before Ryan was born. I knew exactly what I was looking at. "This transfers all company assets and holdings to the new ownership group," I said, scanning the clauses. "That's how sales work, Mother." Ryan's condescension was showing now. That particular tone he used when he thought he was explaining something too complex for my aging mind to grasp, including the intellectual property, patents, and international licensing agreements. Yes, all of it. I looked up at him, really looked at him, tried to find some trace of the little boy who used to bring me drawings from school, who cried when his hamster died, who asked me to check for monsters under his bed. That child was gone. In his place sat a stranger who just tried to steal his own mother's legacy. "And the commercial real estate portfolio?" I asked. "It's all in there." He was getting impatient now. "Everything's been transferred. The new owners take possession next month." "What about this house?" Ryan and Vanessa exchanged a look. It was quick, but I caught it, that moment of silent communication between people who've rehearsed a conversation. "Actually, Mother, that's something we need to discuss." Vanessa's voice had taken on a practiced gentleness, like she was talking to a confused child. "This property is technically part of the company's real estate holdings. It was purchased through corporate funds back in 1983. My fingers tightened on the edge of the desk. "Your father bought this house for our family." "With company money," Ryan said flatly, "which means it's part of the sale. The new owners are willing to let you stay for 6 months while you find alternative housing." I thought that was generous given the circumstances. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Not because I was shocked, I'd known this was coming, but because hearing your own child speak those words out loud does something to you that no amount of preparation can fully armor against. "Alternative housing," I repeated. "There are some very nice senior living communities in the area," Vanessa offered, her tone dripping with false concern. "My grandmother loves her apartment at Meadowbrook. They have bridge tournaments every Thursday." I let that comment hang in the air for a moment. Meadowbrook, where they warehoused inconvenient elderly relatives who'd outlived their usefulness. "I don't play bridge," I said quietly. "Well, I'm sure they have other activities." Vanessa waved her hand dismissively. "The point is, you'll need to start making arrangements. 6 months goes by quickly when you're planning a move. Ryan pulled out a pen, a Mont Blanc, also a gift from me, and set it on top of the folder. If you could just sign at each of the marked tabs, we can get this finalized. This was it. The moment I'd been dreading and preparing for in equal measure. Ryan actually believed he'd outmaneuvered me. He'd convinced himself that I was too old, too grief-stricken, too disconnected from the business to understand what he was doing. He saw a confused widow, not the woman who'd built half that empire while his father took the public credit. I picked up the pen. Vanessa's smile was radiant now, triumphant. She probably thought this was easy, that I'd just roll over and accept being discarded like outdated furniture. Before I sign, I said, I want to understand something. Ryan sighed, the kind of long-suffering exhale that said he was humoring me. What is it, Mother? Why now? Why not wait until I was gone to do this? I'm 68, Ryan. Statistically speaking, you wouldn't have had to wait that much longer. The bluntness of my question seemed to catch him off guard. Good. I wanted him uncomfortable. That's not... Mother, this isn't about waiting for you to die. But his voice lacked conviction, isn't it? I set the pen down, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you decided I was taking up too much space. Living in too big a house, holding on to too much money that you feel entitled to. We don't have time for this. Ryan stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. The sale is done. The contracts are signed. I'm trying to do the courtesy of making this official, but with or without your signature, nothing changes. The company is gone. This house will be sold. You need to accept that and move on. Accept it and move on, I repeated softly. The way you've accepted your father's death and moved on, by destroying everything he built. He built a dinosaur. Ryan's voice rose sharply, and I saw a vein pulse in his temple. An outdated manufacturing company that should have been sold or modernized years ago. Dad was too sentimental to make the hard choices, but I'm not. No, I agreed. You're certainly not sentimental. Vanessa stood too, placing a manicured hand on Ryan's arm in a gesture that was meant to look supportive, but came across as controlling. Ryan, your mother clearly needs time to process this. Why don't we give her some space? She can have all the space she wants. Ryan grabbed his briefcase. But those documents need to be signed and returned to my office by Friday. Tell her, Mother. Tell her this is happening whether you like it or not. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and felt something inside me go very cold and very clear. You know what the saddest part of this is, Ryan? He paused halfway to the door. Your father spent his whole life trying to teach you that character matters more than money. That family is something you protect, not something you liquidate for profit. And you learned nothing. You stood at his funeral and cried, and I actually believed you were grieving. But you weren't sad he was gone. You were just impatient for your inheritance. That's not fair. What? You called me a burden. The words came out harder than I'd intended, but I didn't try to soften them. Not directly, not with that exact word, but that's what you meant when you talked about alternative housing and making arrangements. I'm a burden you're trying to dispose of. Vanessa's expression shifted into something that looked like pity, which was somehow worse than her smirking. Mrs. Mercer, no one thinks you're a burden. We're just being realistic about your needs at this stage of life. The stage of life. I smiled. And it must have looked wrong, because Vanessa actually took a step back. You mean old age, uselessness, the part where I'm supposed to fade quietly into the background while you spend my husband's money and live in my house. It's not your house anymore, Ryan said coldly. That's what I've been trying to explain. The sale is final. Everything transfers in 30 days. You have 6 months to move out, and honestly, Mother, that's more generous than the buyers want it to be. I fought for that timeline. How noble of you. Sign the papers or don't. It doesn't matter. He turned toward the door, Vanessa already clicking ahead of him on those aggressive heels. I picked up the pen again. Ryan. He stopped but didn't turn around. Just so I'm clear, you've sold the company, the properties, the patents, the licensing agreements, everything. Everything, he confirmed. The new owners take full possession on June 1st. And you got 47 million for all of it. I got us 47 million. When you're living in a nice community where people can help take care of you, you'll thank me for this. The condescension was so thick I could have choked on it. This was my son. The baby I'd carried for 9 months, the toddler who'd fallen asleep on my shoulder during long car rides, the teenager I'd stayed up late helping with college applications. And he was talking to me like I was a confused patient who didn't understand her own medical diagnosis. All right, I said quietly, I'll sign. That got his attention. He turned around and I saw the relief flash across his face. He'd expected more of a fight. Probably had a whole speech prepared about my cognitive decline and the importance of accepting reality. I began signing at each marked tab, my signature still firm and clear despite what Ryan apparently thought about my deteriorating mental state. Evelyn Mercer, over and over, 17 times in total. When I finished, I closed the folder and slid it back across the desk. There, all done. Ryan walked over and picked it up, flipping through quickly to verify all the signatures were in place. Satisfied, he tucked it back into his briefcase. I know this seems harsh right now, he said, and there was something in his voice that almost sounded like the son I used to know. But in a few months, when you're settled somewhere manageable, somewhere you don't have to worry about maintaining this huge property, you'll see that this was the right decision. I'm sure you're right, I said. Vanessa frowned slightly. I think she'd been expecting tears or anger or denial. My calm acceptance seemed to unsettle her. We're flying to Milan tomorrow, she said. A little celebration trip. We'll be gone for 2 weeks, but Ryan's assistant has all the information about the moving coordinators. They'll help you start packing when we get back. Milan sounds lovely. It does, doesn't it? Vanessa's smile returned, sharper now. First class, the Bulgari Hotel. Ryan's been so stressed with all the negotiations. He deserves a proper vacation. Of course he does. I stood up from the desk, smoothing down my skirt. You both do. Spending millions of dollars is exhausting work. Ryan's eyes narrowed slightly. He couldn't tell if I was being sarcastic or sincere. Good, let him wonder. We should go, Vanessa said, already moving toward the door. Our flight's early. Ryan lingered for just a moment, and I hoped, that maybe some part of him felt guilty, that maybe he'd look at me and realize what he'd just done to his own mother. But then he said, good luck, mother, with the move and everything. Good luck. Like I was embarking on some minor lifestyle change instead of being forced out of my home by my own child. Good luck to you too, Ryan, I replied. You're going to need it. He didn't catch the weight in those words. Neither did Vanessa. They were too busy congratulating themselves on their victory to hear the warning underneath. I walked them to the door, watched them climb into that expensive BMW, watched them drive away down the long driveway lined with oak trees that David and I had planted 30 years ago. The gates closed behind them with a soft click. Then I went back inside, closed the door, and stood in the entrance hall for a long moment, letting the silence settle around me. The mahogany clock struck 4. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd been waiting 3 years to call. Leon answered on the second ring. Evelyn, is it done? He signed everything. They're leaving for Milan tomorrow morning. And? He called me a burden, Leon. Not in those exact words, but close enough. He's kicking me out of my own house and patting himself on the back for giving me 6 months to disappear. There was a pause. Leon had known me for over 40 years. He'd watched me build the company alongside David, had helped me set up the trusts, had warned me years ago that Ryan was showing concerning signs. Do you want to proceed? His voice was gentle but firm. We can still pull back if... No. My voice was steady now, clear. He made his choice. Now he gets to live with the consequences. All right then. I could hear Leon shifting papers on his end. I'll make the calls. By tomorrow afternoon, it'll be in motion. How long until he realizes? Given the timeline you've structured, he'll check his accounts in Milan and find them frozen, probably 48 hours after he lands. I closed my eyes, imagining Ryan's face when he discovered the money was gone. Part of me, a very small part, felt sad about what was coming, but that part was drowned out by the memory of him calling me a burden, of Vanessa's smirk, of both of them discussing my future like I was a piece of furniture to be moved into storage. "Do it," I said. "Consider it done." "And Evelyn?" "Yes, David would be proud of you. What you're about to do, it's not revenge, it's justice." After we hung up, I walked through the house slowly, room by room. The living room where we'd hosted Christmas parties. The kitchen where I'd taught Ryan to bake cookies. The master bedroom where David had died in my arms 2 years ago, whispering that I was the strongest person he'd ever known. Ryan thought he'd won. Thought he'd outmaneuvered his aging, grief-stricken mother. Thought he'd sold an empire and secured his fortune. What he didn't know, what neither he nor Vanessa had bothered to discover, was that the company he'd just sold was an empty shell, a corporate structure with a famous name and not much else. The real assets, the patents David had spent 20 years developing, the international licensing agreements worth hundreds of millions, the commercial properties in 12 countries, the manufacturing facilities, the technology portfolios, all of it had been quietly transferred into a private trust 7 years ago, a trust that only I controlled. David and I had seen the signs early. The way Ryan talked about money, about legacy, about what he was owed. We'd watched him marry Vanessa 3 years after David's first stroke, had seen how she encouraged his worst impulses. David had made me promise, during one of his lucid moments near the end, that I'd protect what we'd built. Not for Ryan's sake, but for the sake of everyone whose livelihoods depended on it. So we'd planned. Carefully, methodically, Leon had helped us create a structure that looked simple on the surface, but was actually a maze of holding companies and international trusts. The public company Ryan just sold, it owned the name, the original headquarters building, and a handful of low-value contracts. Everything else, everything that mattered, was elsewhere. I'd spent 3 years watching Ryan position himself to betray me. 3 years of playing the confused widow, the aging mother who didn't quite understand the business anymore. 3 years of careful documentation, of recorded conversations, of building an airtight case. And now he'd finally made his move, which meant I could make mine. I poured myself a glass of David's favorite whiskey, a 30-year-old Macallan he'd been saving for special occasions, and raised it toward his photograph on the mantel. "For you," I whispered, "and for everyone who thinks women my age are too soft to fight back." Tomorrow, Ryan would wake up in Milan thinking he was a $47 million success story. He'd congratulate himself on his business acumen, on his ability to make hard choices. But within 48 hours, he'd learn the truth. And by the time he figured out what had happened, it would be far too late to stop it. I took a sip of the whiskey, feeling it burn warm and strong down my throat. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. And this time, I wasn't playing to tie. I was playing to win. The morning after Ryan left for Milan, I woke up at 5:30 like I had every day for the past 40 years. Old habits die hard, and David used to say that successful people don't sleep in. I made coffee in the kitchen that Vanessa thought would soon belong to someone else, and I sat at the breakfast table watching the sun come up over the garden. My phone buzzed at exactly 6:15. Leon, always punctual. "They boarded the flight 20 minutes ago," he said without preamble. "First class to Milan Malpensa, arriving tomorrow morning local time." Good. I took a sip of coffee. It was too hot and burned my tongue, but I didn't care. And the accounts? Frozen as of midnight, every single one. The trust has full control now. When he tries to access anything, credit cards, bank transfers, investment portfolios, it'll all decline. I've set it up so there's a 48-hour delay before he can even reach anyone who might explain what happened. He'll call me, undoubtedly, multiple times. Are you ready for that? Was I ready to hear my son panic? To listen to him realize that the woman he dismissed as a confused burden had just pulled the rug out from under his entire existence. "Yes," I said, "I'm ready." Leon was quiet for a moment. "Evelyn, I have to ask one more time, are you absolutely certain about this? Once he discovers what you've done, there's no walking it back. The relationship ended when he called me a burden and tried to sell my home out from under me," I interrupted. "What I'm doing now is just making that reality official." "All right then, I'll keep monitoring. Call me if you need anything." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone. Part of me, the part that was still a mother, that still remembered rocking a feverish toddler at 3 in the morning, wanted to call Leon back and stop everything, to forgive Ryan, to pretend the last few years hadn't happened, to just be a family again. But that part was small and getting smaller, because the larger part of me remembered Vanessa's smirk, remembered Ryan's cold eyes, remembered the exact tone of voice he'd use when discussing my future, like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person who'd raised him. I spent that first day going through old photographs, not because I was feeling sentimental, but because I needed to remind myself who I was before I became Ryan's mother or David's widow. There were pictures of me at 25, fierce and ambitious, standing outside the first office building we'd leased. Me at 32, pregnant with Ryan, holding architectural plans for our first major expansion. Me at 40, shaking hands with a Japanese executive after closing a deal that David had thought was impossible. I'd been someone, I'd built something. And somehow over the years I'd let people forget that. Let Ryan forget that. Maybe I'd even started to forget it myself. Not anymore. The next morning I called our longtime housekeeper, Maria. She'd been with us for 23 years, since before David's first stroke. She knew things about this family that no one else did. "Mrs. Mercer," she sounded concerned. "Is everything all right? Mr. Ryan said you might be making some changes." "When did he tell you that?" "Last week. He said you were thinking about moving to a smaller place, that I should start thinking about other employment." My hand tightened on the phone. He'd been planning this for at least a week, probably longer, had been setting the stage, telling people I was declining, that changes were coming, building his narrative before I even knew what was happening. "Maria, I need you to do something for me." "Of course." "I need you to pack up everything in Ryan's old bedroom. Every trophy, every photograph, every piece of memorabilia. Box it all carefully and put it in the garage." There was a pause. "All of it?" "Every single item. I want that room completely empty by the end of the week." "May I ask why?" "Because it's going to be my new office," I said, "and I need the space." I could hear the smile in her voice. "I'll start today." That afternoon, I drove to the company headquarters for the first time in 7 years. The building David had designed, all glass and steel and ambition, rose up against the skyline like a monument. The parking garage still recognized my access code. Some things at least Ryan hadn't thought to change. I took the elevator to the executive floor, and when the doors opened, I saw that the lobby had been redecorated. Gone were the warm woods and family photographs that David had insisted on. Now everything was sleek and minimal and cold. Very Vanessa. The receptionist was new, young, maybe 24. She looked up from her computer with a professional smile that faltered when she saw me. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Marcus Chen." Marcus was the CFO, had been with the company for 15 years. He'd worked directly under David and knew exactly how things really operated. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but tell him Evelyn Mercer is here. He'll make time." Her eyes widened. "Mrs. Mercer? I'll call him right away." 3 minutes later, Marcus appeared in the lobby. He was in his late 50s now, his hair more grey than black, but his eyes were sharp as ever. When he saw me, something like relief crossed his face. "Evelyn," he came over and took both my hands. "It's been too long. Walk with me, Marcus." We went to the coffee shop across the street, the one where David and I used to meet for breakfast before board meetings, back when I was still pretending to be just a supportive spouse. Once we were seated with our drinks, Marcus leaned forward. I heard about the sale. What did you hear exactly? That Ryan brokered a deal with North Point Capital, $47 million for full acquisition, that we're transitioning ownership over the next 30 days. And what do you think about that? Marcus chose his words carefully. I think it's interesting that North Point paid $47 million for a company that on paper should be worth at least $200 million. On paper being the operative phrase. His expression shifted. Evelyn, what's really going on? I told him. Not everything, but enough. About the trust David and I had set up, about the asset transfers, about the shell company Ryan had actually sold. With every sentence, Marcus's eyes grew wider. So North Point bought a brand name, the headquarters building, and a handful of minor contracts. Nothing that actually generates significant revenue. The patents, the international agreements, the real estate portfolio, the manufacturing facilities, all of that remains in the trust, which you control, which I control. Marcus sat back in his chair, and for the first time since David died, I saw him smile, really smile. Does Ryan know? Not yet. He will soon. I'm guessing by tomorrow afternoon, Milan time. Jesus, Marcus shook his head. He's going to lose his mind. Probably, but that's not why I'm here. I need to know who's loyal to the real company and who's loyal to Ryan. The smile faded. You're planning to rebuild. I'm planning to continue what David and I started. The company never stopped existing, Marcus. It just went underground for a while. Now it's time to bring it back into the light. How many people know? You're the fifth. Leon, obviously. My accountant, Patricia. David's old business partner, Kenneth. He's been managing the international operations from Singapore. And now you. Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing. The employees. The ones who think they're about to be absorbed into North Point. We'll learn the truth soon enough, but I need to know who I can trust when that happens. Ryan's been here for 5 years as CEO. He's built relationships, made promises. Some people are going to see this as a betrayal, and others are going to see it as salvation. Marcus leaned forward again. Evelyn, there are at least 40 people in that building who remember what this company was like when you and David were running it together. When decisions were about innovation and quality, not just quarterly profits. Ryan's tenure has been, he paused, diplomatic as ever, challenging. Challenging how? He's cut research and development by 60%, laid off a third of the workforce, outsourced manufacturing to the cheapest bidders, quality be damned. The company Ryan was running, it was dying, slowly but definitely dying. Selling it was probably the smartest thing he could have done, if he'd actually owned what he was selling. This was worse than I'd thought. I've been out of touch. You were grieving. No one blames you for that. But yeah, things have changed, and not for the better. I felt something harden in my chest. Ryan hadn't just tried to steal from me. He'd been destroying David's legacy, piece by piece, running the company into the ground while paying himself a 7-figure salary. I want a list, I said. Everyone who's been laid off in the last 5 years, everyone who quit because they couldn't stand what the company was becoming, everyone who remembers what we used to stand for. You're rehiring, I'm rebuilding, and I need people who understand what we're actually building. Marcus pulled out his phone. I can have that list to you by tonight, but Evelyn, when Ryan finds out what you're doing, he's going to come after me with everything he has. I know, I'm counting on it. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept checking my phone, waiting for the call I knew was coming. Leon had said 48 hours, but Ryan was impulsive. He might check his accounts early, might try to transfer money for a fancy dinner or a shopping spree. The call came at 2:17 in the morning. Milan was 9 hours ahead, which meant it was just after 11 there. Late morning. Probably right around the time he tried to pay for brunch at some overpriced cafe. I let it ring 4 times before answering, let him sweat a little. Ryan, what did you do? His voice was strangled, barely controlled. What the hell did you do? I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. My accounts, all of them. Every single card is declining. The bank says my accounts are frozen, and when I try to call anyone, I get routed to some legal office that says they can't discuss my case. I sat up in bed, turned on the lamp, took my time arranging the pillows behind me before responding. That does sound frustrating. Frustrating. Mother, I have no access to any money. None. We can't even pay for the hotel room. How unfortunate. Perhaps you should use some of that 47 million you made from selling the company. There was a long silence. I could hear Vanessa in the background, her voice shrill and demanding, though I couldn't make out the words. The sale money isn't available yet, Ryan said, and I could hear him struggling to stay calm. It's an escrow pending the final transition. You know that. You signed the papers. I did sign papers, didn't I? So many papers. I can hardly remember what they all said. Stop playing games. His voice cracked. Whatever you're doing, undo it. Right now. I mean it, Mother. This isn't funny. You're right. It's not funny at all. In fact, I'd say it's about as funny as being told I have 6 months to move out of my own home. About as amusing as being called a burden. About as entertaining as watching my son sell 43 years of his father's work for a fraction of what it's worth. You don't understand business. That sale was... I understand business perfectly well, Ryan. Better than you, apparently. Tell me, did North Point explain to you exactly what assets they were acquiring? Another pause. Longer this time. They bought the company, all of it. Did they? Or did they buy what you had the legal authority to sell, which, as it turns out, wasn't actually very much? I heard him moving, probably walking away from Vanessa so she couldn't hear. His voice dropped to something dangerous. What are you talking about? The patents, Ryan, the international licensing agreements, the commercial real estate portfolio, the manufacturing facilities in Germany, China, and Mexico, the technology development division, the renewable energy subsidiary. Should I go on? Those are all part of the company. Those are all part of a private trust that your father and I established 7 years ago. A trust that was never included in the corporate structure you just sold. North Point bought a shell, dear. A very expensive, very empty shell. The silence that followed was so complete I thought he might have hung up. Then I heard him breathing fast and shallow. That's not possible. It's not only possible, it's documented with the SEC, the IRS, and corporate registries in 12 countries. Leon has all the paperwork if you'd like to review it. Though I suspect North Point's lawyers are reviewing it right now and having some very uncomfortable conversations with your buyers. You can't do this. His voice was shaking now. You can't just, this is fraud. This is protecting my assets from someone who demonstrated clear intent to steal them. And before you start making legal threats, remember that I have recordings of our conversation. Every word, including the part where you told me I was being kicked out of my own house. You recorded me. I documented a business meeting. You should be familiar with the practice. I'm sure you've done it dozens of times. The difference is my recordings actually hold up in court. Vanessa's voice came through clearly now, sharp and scared. What's happening? Ryan, what is she saying? I heard him trying to explain, his words tumbling over each other. Then Vanessa's shriek, what do you mean the money's not real? Oh dear, I said mildly. It sounds like you're having a difficult morning. Maybe you should call the front desk and see if they'll let you work off your hotel bill by cleaning rooms. This is insane, Ryan was yelling now, all pretense of control gone. You're a crazy old woman who doesn't know what she's doing. I'm going to sue you for everything. With what money, sweetheart? Your accounts are frozen pending a full audit of your financial activities over the past 5 years. Apparently, there are some questions about expense reports and personal use of corporate funds. Leon's forensic accountants are very thorough. That stopped him cold. You're auditing me? When you try to steal from a major corporation, even if it's your family's company, there tend to be legal consequences. But don't worry. If you haven't done anything wrong, I'm sure the investigation won't turn up anything concerning. I could practically hear his panic crystallizing into rage. I am going to destroy you for this. You already tried that, remember? Last week when you sold my house and told me to move into a nursing home. How did that work out for you? When you get back, you'll find your office has been cleared out and your access to the building has been revoked. I'd suggest you start updating your resume. I hear North Point might be looking for someone to blame for their $47 million mistake. Vanessa grabbed the phone. I could hear the struggle, then her voice came through, dripping with venom. You bitter old bitch. You're doing this because you're jealous. Because your own son found someone who actually loves him instead of trying to control him. Is that what you think this is about? I asked calmly. Love? Ryan gave you everything. He tried to take care of you, and this is how you repay him? By sabotaging his future. He tried to take care of me by stealing my company and evicting me from my home. Interesting definition of care. That company was his birthright. David wanted his son to be a decent human being. Clearly, we failed on that front, but thank you for clarifying that you believe stealing is acceptable as long as you frame it as birthright. I'll make sure our lawyers have that quote for the depositions. I heard more scuffling, then Ryan's voice again, steadier now, but cold. Fine, you want to play this game? We'll play, but when I'm done, you're going to wish you just signed those papers and gone quietly. Oh, Ryan. I felt genuinely sad for a moment. I already won. You just haven't realized it yet. How do you figure that? Because I have the company, the assets, and the moral high ground. You have a failed sale, frozen accounts, and a wife who's probably already calculating whether it's worth staying with a broke husband. What exactly are you planning to do from Milan with no money and no power base? The silence stretched out. I could hear Vanessa in the background, her voice rising in pitch as reality set in. Could hear Ryan's breathing, harsh and desperate. I'm your son, he finally said, and for the first time he sounded less like an adversary and more like a lost child. Doesn't that mean anything to you? That almost broke me. Almost. You stopped being my son when you decided I was worth less than a real estate transaction, I said quietly. What you're feeling right now, this betrayal, this shock, this realization that someone you trusted has taken everything from you, that's what you did to me. The only difference is that I actually had a right to what I'm protecting. You were just trying to steal. I wasn't stealing. It was supposed to be mine eventually. Eventually, after I died, but you couldn't wait, could you? You couldn't just let me live out my life in peace. You had to take it all right now. The company was dying under your sentimental attachment to Dad's outdated methods. The company you sold didn't exist, Ryan. What you thought was dying was already dead. I buried it 3 years ago and built something new, something you never even knew about because you were too arrogant to ask questions. Vanessa shouted something I couldn't make out. Then there was a crash, like a phone hitting a wall. The line went dead. I sat there in the dark, holding my phone, feeling the weight of what I'd just done settle over me like a heavy blanket. This was my son, my only child, the baby I'd carried for 9 months, the toddler who'd called me mama, the teenager who'd cried in my arms when his first girlfriend broke his heart, and I'd just financially destroyed him. My phone rang again. Same number. I answered. We're coming home. Ryan's voice was flat now, emotionless, the voice of someone who'd moved past panic into cold calculation. We'll be on the next available flight, and when we get there, you and I are going to have a very different conversation. I look forward to it. Bring your lawyer, bring your accountants, bring whoever you want, because I'm bringing an army mother, and when I'm done, you're going to regret every single decision you've made. Noted. Have a safe flight. Oh, and Ryan, what? You might want to book economy. I hear it's much more affordable. I hung up before he could respond. Then I sat there in my bedroom, the bedroom I'd shared with David for 40 years, the bedroom Ryan had tried to take from me, and I cried. Not because I regretted what I'd done, but because there's no victory in destroying your own child, even when he deserves it. The next morning I called an emergency board meeting. The real board, not the puppet directors Ryan had installed. These were the people who'd known David, who'd built the company from nothing, who remembered what we actually stood for. Kenneth flew in from Singapore. Patricia drove up from her office downtown. Marcus was already there, looking grim, and Leon, of course, with his briefcase full of documents that would change everything. We met in a conference room at Leon's law firm instead of the company headquarters. Neutral ground. "Gentlemen, Patricia," I began, standing at the head of the table. "Thank you for coming on short notice. I assume you've all heard various versions of recent events." Kenneth spoke first, his British accent crisp. "I heard your son attempted to sell the company and is now discovering that he sold significantly less than he thought. I also heard he's currently stranded in Italy with no access to funds. Quite the predicament." "That's one way to put it." Patricia, always direct, cut to the chase. "What's the plan, Evelyn? You fired the opening shot. Now what?" "Now we rebuild. Properly this time. No more hiding behind David's memory. No more pretending I was just the supportive wife. The company goes public, not to sell it, but to make it clear who actually owns and operates it." Marcus frowned. "Ryan's going to fight this. He'll claim incompetence, mental decline, undue influence." "Let him try." Leon slid a folder across the table. "We have documentation of every decision Evelyn's made regarding the company for the past 7 years. Financial records, board minutes, strategic planning documents. We also have testimony from 12 executives who've worked with her directly and can attest to her competence. And we have recordings of Ryan's own words demonstrating his intent to defraud his mother." Kenneth picked up the folder, flipped through it. "This is thorough." "David taught me to always have an exit strategy," I said, "though I never thought I'd need one against my own son." We spent the next 4 hours laying out the plan, restructuring the company's public face, reaching out to former employees, preparing for the media storm that would inevitably come when word got out that a widow had outsmarted her own child in a corporate power play. By the time we finished, it was late afternoon. Everyone else had left, and I sat alone with Leon in his office. "How are you holding up?" he asked gently. "I destroyed my relationship with my only child today. How do you think I'm holding up?" "You protected yourself from someone who was trying to exploit you. That's different." "Is it? Because right now, it feels like I just blew up my entire family over money." Leon leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Evelyn, in all the years I've known you, I've never heard you lie to yourself. Don't start now. This isn't about money. It's about dignity. It's about a son who looked at his mother and saw a resource to be extracted rather than a person to be loved. He's still my son. And you're still his mother, but that doesn't mean you have to let him rob you blind while smiling about it." I knew he was right, but knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are two very different things. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but I knew immediately who it was from. "Landed, on my way. Hope you're ready." I showed it to Leon. "He's bluffing," Leon said. "He has no legal standing, no financial resources, and no leverage. He's coming home to rage and make threats, but that's all it'll be. You don't know Ryan when he's cornered." "No, but I know the law, and the law is very clearly on your side." I drove home as the sun was setting, the sky turning that particular shade of orange that David had always loved. The house looked the same as it always had, dignified, permanent, unmovable. My home, not Ryan's inheritance, mine. Maria had finished clearing out Ryan's room. The space was empty now, except for the boxes stacked neatly in the corner, each one labeled in her precise handwriting. Trophies, yearbooks, photographs, letters, the accumulated debris of a childhood that felt like it had happened to different people in a different lifetime. I stood in the doorway looking at the empty room and made a decision. Tomorrow I'd call a contractor. I'd turn the space into what I'd told Maria, an office, a command center, a place where I could rebuild what Ryan had tried to destroy. But tonight I allowed myself one last moment of grief for the son I'd lost. Not to death, but to greed. not to illness, but to entitlement. And then I closed the door on that empty room and walked away, because Ryan was right about one thing: we were going to have a very different conversation when he got home. But this time, I'd be the one holding all the cards. Ryan showed up at 7 the next morning, which told me he'd taken a red-eye flight and come straight from the airport. No stopping at his condo to shower or change. No calling ahead. Just rage and desperation, and the kind of reckless urgency that comes from watching your entire world collapse in real time. I was in the kitchen making breakfast when I heard his key in the lock. Heard him struggle with it, swear under his breath, try again. Of course it didn't work. I'd had the locks changed 2 days ago. He started pounding on the door hard enough to rattle the frame. I took my time finishing my coffee, wiping down the counter, putting the butter back in the refrigerator. Let him stand out there and pound. Let him feel what it's like to be locked out of somewhere you thought belonged to you. When I finally opened the door, he looked like hell. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, a day's worth of stubble on his jaw. Vanessa stood behind him, her designer luggage scattered on the front step, her perfect makeup smudged under her eyes. "My key doesn't work," Ryan said. Not hello, not sorry for showing up unannounced, just an accusation. "I know I changed the locks." "You can't change the locks on my house." "My house," I corrected. "As we've established, this property was never part of the company you sold. It's mine, bought and paid for decades before you were born, and you're not welcome here anymore." Vanessa pushed past Ryan, her face twisted with fury. "You can't just lock us out. We have rights." "What rights would those be exactly? The right to steal? The right to commit fraud? I'm genuinely curious which legal principle you're citing." Ryan grabbed my arm, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to be threatening. "Stop playing games and let us in. We need to talk." I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. "You have exactly 3 seconds to remove your hand before I call the police and report assault." He let go like I'd burned him. "Assault? I'm your son. And you just grabbed me without permission on my property after I told you to leave. That's called battery. Would you like me to explain the other charges I could file? Attempted theft, fraud, elder abuse." "Elder abuse?" Vanessa laughed, high and sharp. "You're not some fragile victim. You're a manipulative witch who set this whole thing up." "I protected myself from thieves," I said calmly. "If you find that manipulative, perhaps you should examine your own assumptions about what you were entitled to take from me." Ryan's face had gone red, that vein in his temple pulsing the way it used to when he was a teenager having a tantrum. "Fine. You want to do this on the front step? Let's do it." That sale was legal. I had full authority as CEO to make that decision. "You had authority to sell the assets under corporate ownership," I agreed, which amounted to about 3% of the actual company value. "Congratulations, you successfully sold almost nothing." "That's a lie. The lawyers said what you paid them to say." "Did you actually read the incorporation documents, the trust agreements, the asset transfer forms from 7 years ago? Or did you just assume that because you had a fancy title, you controlled everything?" The look on his face told me everything I needed to know. He hadn't read anything, had just barreled forward, assuming his birthright gave him ownership of whatever he wanted. "Leon's waiting inside," I said, "along with my accountant and 2 corporate attorneys. If you want to have this conversation properly, you're welcome to join us in the dining room. But you don't get to storm in here making threats. Those days are over." Ryan looked past me into the house like he was trying to see if I was bluffing. "You're really going to make me sit through a formal meeting in my own childhood home? It stopped being your home when you tried to evict me from it. And yes, I'm really going to make you sit through a formal meeting, because this isn't a family discussion anymore, Ryan. This is business, and in business you don't get to bully people into giving you what you want." Vanessa pulled out her phone. "I'm calling our lawyer." "Good idea. You're going to need one. Make sure they specialize in fraud defense." 20 minutes later, we were all sitting around the dining table where Ryan had slid those papers across to me just days ago. Funny how quickly positions can reverse. Leon had his briefcase open, documents spread out in neat piles. Patricia sat to my right with her laptop ready to pull up financial records at a moment's notice. The two corporate attorneys, Jennifer and Michael, both from Leon's firm, flanked the other end of the table, their expressions professionally neutral. Ryan and Vanessa sat across from me. They'd refused coffee, refused water, refused everything except the chance to tear me apart. But now, faced with actual lawyers and actual documentation, some of Ryan's bluster was fading into something that looked almost like fear. Leon started. Let's establish the basic facts. On May 8th, Ryan Mercer, acting as CEO of Mercer Industries, executed a sale agreement with North Point Capital for $47 million. The sale included corporate headquarters, the Mercer trademark, and a portfolio of legacy contracts. Is that accurate? Ryan's jaw tightened. You know it is. And you represented to North Point that this sale included all company assets, intellectual property, and operational facilities. Correct? That's what I was selling, the entire company. Except you didn't own the entire company, Patricia said, pulling up a spreadsheet on her laptop and turning it so Ryan could see. These are the asset transfers that occurred between 2018 and 2021. Patents, licensing agreements, manufacturing facilities, commercial real estate, all moved into the Mercer Family Trust, a private entity not subject to corporate sale. Ryan leaned forward, squinting at the screen. I never saw any of this. Because you never asked, I said quietly. You assumed. You saw the company name on a building and thought that meant you controlled everything inside it. Dad wouldn't have hidden assets from me. Your father didn't hide anything. These transfers were properly filed, documented, and recorded with every relevant regulatory body. They're public record. You just never bothered to look. Vanessa grabbed Ryan's arm. Tell them about the board approval. You had board approval for the sale. Jennifer, the younger of the two attorneys, smiled thinly. The board Mr. Mercer assembled consisted of 3 personal friends, his wife, and 1 legitimate business partner, who resigned in protest 2 weeks before the sale. Hardly a robust corporate governance structure. It was a legal board of a company that owned almost nothing, Michael finished. Mr. Mercer, you sold a corporate shell. The question now is whether you did so knowingly, which would make it fraud, or unknowingly, which would make it gross negligence. Either way, North Point is going to want their money back. The color drained from Ryan's face. They can't. The sale is final. The sale is final pending transition of assets, Leon said. But if the assets don't exist, the sale was based on fraudulent representation. North Point's attorneys contacted me yesterday. They're preparing a lawsuit against you personally for material misrepresentation. They should be suing you, Ryan pointed at me. You're the one who hid the assets. I didn't hide anything. I reorganized my private holdings in a manner consistent with estate planning and asset protection, something you would understand if you'd ever bothered to learn how wealth actually works instead of just spending it. Vanessa stood up abruptly. This is insane. We're not sitting here listening to you people twist everything around. Ryan acted in good faith. Ryan acted in greed, I said, and my voice was sharper than I intended. He saw his mother as an obstacle to his inheritance and decided to remove that obstacle by any means necessary. The fact that he was too incompetent to actually accomplish the theft doesn't make it less of an attempt. I'm your son. Ryan slammed his hand on the table. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Don't I get any benefit of the doubt? You got 68 years of benefit of the doubt. You got a childhood in this house, a college education, a job you didn't earn, and a company position you weren't qualified for. You got everything a parent could give a child, and you repaid that by calling me a burden and trying to steal my home. His hands were shaking now. I was trying to help you. Stop lying. The words came out flat and final. Not to me, not to your lawyers, not even to yourself. You weren't trying to help anyone but yourself. You wanted the money. You wanted the prestige. You wanted to be the big man who sold his father's company for millions, and you were willing to destroy me to get it. That's not, I didn't. Ryan's words were tumbling over each other now, his composure completely cracked. You don't understand the pressure I was under. The company was struggling. Vanessa's family expected us to maintain a certain lifestyle, and you were just sitting here in this massive house doing nothing. Doing nothing. I repeated the words slowly, letting them hang in the air. I was doing nothing while you were running the company into the ground. Is that the story you're telling yourself? Leon slid another folder across the table. These are the quarterly reports from your tenure as CEO, Mr. Mercer. Revenue down 18%. Employee retention down 32%. Customer satisfaction scores at an all-time low. Research and development budget cut to almost nothing. Would you like to explain what strategic vision drove those decisions? Ryan didn't touch the folder. I was modernizing, cutting costs, making us competitive. You were gutting the company and pocketing the difference, Patricia said bluntly. Your salary increased 40% while you were laying off experienced employees. You charged personal expenses to corporate accounts. You used company resources for private travel. We have documentation of all of it. Vanessa's face had gone pale. Ryan, what are they talking about? It's normal business practice. Every CEO has discretionary spending. Not to the tune of $300,000 a year in personal expenses, Michael said. That's embezzlement, Mr. Mercer, and it's a criminal offense. The room went very quiet. I watched my son process what he'd just heard, watched the moment it clicked that this wasn't just about family drama anymore. This was about potential jail time. You're going to send your own son to prison. His voice cracked on the last word. I'm going to hold you accountable for your actions, I said. What happens after that depends on whether you're willing to cooperate or whether you're going to keep making this worse. Ryan looked at Vanessa. She looked back at him with an expression I recognized. The cold calculation of someone deciding whether it was worth staying on a sinking ship. I need to use the bathroom, Vanessa said abruptly. Down the hall, second door on the left, I told her. She left without looking at Ryan. I knew we wouldn't see her again. She'd come in through the front door and she'd leave through the back, probably already calling a car service, already planning her exit strategy. Ryan watched her go with something like desperation in his eyes. Vanessa, but she was already gone. He turned back to me, and for just a second I saw the little boy he used to be, lost and scared, and looking for his mother to fix everything. What do you want from me? He asked quietly. The truth. For once in your life, just tell the truth. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I thought it would make me important. The sale. I thought if I could pull off something that big, people would finally see me as something other than David Mercer's disappointing son. So you were willing to betray me for validation from strangers. I thought you wouldn't even notice. You've been so checked out since Dad died, just wandering around this house like a ghost. I thought I was doing you a favor, honestly. Setting you up somewhere smaller, somewhere you wouldn't have to worry about maintaining this place, while you kept the money and the glory. While I finally got to be the one who built something instead of just inheriting it. Leon leaned forward. Mr. Mercer, you need to understand your situation. North Point is going to sue you. They'll likely win, which means you'll owe them $47 million you don't have. The IRS is going to investigate the expense discrepancies, and there are enough irregularities in your corporate governance that criminal charges are a real possibility. Unless, Jennifer added, you cooperate fully with returning any misappropriated funds, provide complete documentation of your actions, and agree to certain conditions moving forward. Ryan looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. What conditions? I took a breath. This was the moment I'd been building toward. You resign from any and all positions with any Mercer-affiliated company. You sign a legal agreement acknowledging the trust structure and your lack of ownership. You undergo a full financial audit and repay any personal expenses charged to corporate accounts. And you agree to stay away from me and this property for a minimum of 6 months. 6 months? 6 months where you figure out who you are without my money, without your father's name, and without anyone to bail you out. You want to prove you can build something? Build yourself from the ground up. Ryan's face cycled through anger, fear, and something that might have been understanding. And if I refuse, then we prosecute to the fullest extent of the law, and you'll spend the next several years fighting lawsuits and potentially facing prison time. Your choice. He sat there for what felt like an hour, but was probably only a few minutes. I watched him war with himself, watched his ego fight against his survival instinct. Where would I even go? He finally asked. That's not my problem to solve. You're 43 years old, Ryan. You have a law degree and business experience. Find an apartment, find a job. Find out what your life looks like when you can't just take whatever you want from people who love you. This is cruel. No, cruel would be letting you continue down this path until you destroyed yourself completely. This is the only kindness I have left to give you, a chance to become someone worth respecting. Vanessa appeared in the doorway then, her designer purse over her shoulder, her suitcase in hand. She didn't even look at Ryan. Vanessa? He stood up. Where are you going? Home. To my parents. I can't do this, Ryan. I married someone successful, someone with prospects. Not someone about to be sued for millions of dollars. But I thought, we're married. We've been married 6 months. An annulment should be fairly straightforward. She finally looked at him, and there wasn't a trace of affection in her eyes. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to bankrupt myself for your mistakes. She walked out, just like that, left her husband sitting in his mother's dining room, facing financial ruin and potential criminal charges, and she walked away without a backward glance. Ryan stared at the empty doorway. She just left. People tend to do that when the money runs out, I said quietly. Now you know how it feels. He turned to me with something raw and broken in his expression. Did you ever actually love me? Or was I just another business asset to manage? The question hit harder than I expected. I loved you enough to carry you for 9 months. Loved you enough to sit up with you through every childhood illness. Loved you enough to fight with your father when he wanted to cut you off after you crashed his car senior year. I loved you enough to give you chance after chance after chance to be better than you were choosing to be. But love doesn't mean letting you destroy yourself, and it definitely doesn't mean letting you destroy me. So what happens now? Leon slid one more document across the table. You sign this agreement. You comply with the audit. You make restitution where possible. And you start rebuilding your life without leaning on your mother's resources. Ryan picked up the pen with a shaking hand. He looked at me one more time, searching for something. Forgiveness maybe, or permission to keep being the person he'd been. He didn't find it. He signed. The lawyers witnessed, collected the papers, and began packing up their materials with the efficient silence of people who'd seen family implosion before and would see it again. Ryan stood up slowly, looking around the dining room like he was seeing it for the first time, or maybe the last time. I don't have anywhere to go. There's a Marriott 3 miles down the road. They have weekly rates. I can't afford a hotel. You froze my accounts, remember? I pulled an envelope from my pocket and slid it across the table. There's $5,000 in there. Cash. That's all you get from me. Make it last. He stared at the envelope like it was a snake. $5,000, which is $5,000 more than you deserve after what you tried to do. Take it or leave it. He took it. Of course he took it. He was broke and scared and starting to realize how deep the hole he dug actually was. As he walked towards the door, he stopped and turned back. I really did think I was doing the right thing. In my head, it all made sense. That's the thing about justifying bad behavior, Ryan. It always makes sense in your head. That's why you need people around you who'll tell you the truth instead of just what you want to hear. And you're not going to be that person anymore. Not until you prove you can hear it. Right now, you just twist anything I say into more ammunition against me. He nodded slowly. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Sorry you got caught, or sorry you did it? He opened his mouth, closed it again. Couldn't answer because we both knew the truth. Then he left, and I listened to his footsteps cross the marble entryway, heard the front door open and close, heard his car start up and pull away down the driveway. Leon waited until the sound faded completely before speaking. How are you doing? I just ended my relationship with my only child. How do you think I'm doing? Patricia reached over and squeezed my hand. You did the right thing. The right thing feels terrible. It usually does, Michael said quietly, but that doesn't make it less right. After everyone left, I sat alone in the dining room, looking at the chair Ryan had sat in, remembering all the family dinners we'd had in this room, birthday celebrations, holiday meals, the night after David's funeral when Ryan had held my hand and promised he'd take care of everything. Turns out his idea of taking care of everything was taking everything. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You'll regret this. I deleted it without responding. Empty threats from someone with no power left were just noise. But then another text came through. Vanessa's lawyer already filed for annulment. Says I misrepresented my financial situation. Everything's falling apart. I stared at that message for a long time, trying to feel something. Triumph maybe, or vindication, or satisfaction that he was finally facing consequences. Instead, I just felt tired. I didn't text back. What was there to say? I'd given him the tools to save himself. Whether he used them or not wasn't my responsibility anymore. Maria came in to clear away the coffee cups and water glasses, took one look at my face and said, "You need to eat something." "I'm not hungry." "I didn't ask if you were hungry. I said you need to eat." She disappeared into the kitchen and came back with soup and bread, set it in front of me like I was a child who needed looking after. Maybe I was. I ate because she told me to, because my body needed fuel even if my heart was too heavy to care about food. And when I finished, Maria sat down across from me in the chair Ryan had occupied. "Mr. David would be proud of you," she said. "Would he? I just destroyed his son's life." "You saved his son's life. Mr. Ryan was heading somewhere very dark. Maybe this stops him before he gets there. Or maybe it just makes him hate me forever." Maria shrugged. "Maybe both things can be true, but you can't set yourself on fire to keep him warm. That's not love. That's just slow suicide." I looked at this woman who'd cleaned my house and listened to my problems and watched my family disintegrate over the years. When did you get so wise? I raised 4 kids on a housekeeper's salary while their father drank himself to death. You learn some things about setting boundaries or you don't survive. She stood up, collected the dishes, and left me sitting there with that truth settling in. I couldn't set myself on fire to keep Ryan warm, no matter how much the mother in me wanted to fix everything, to make it all okay, to sacrifice whatever necessary to see my son happy. That time was over. Now came the hard part, living with what I'd done and hoping that somewhere down the road Ryan would understand why it had been necessary. But that was future Evelyn's problem. Present Evelyn just needed to get through today and tomorrow and the day after that. One day at a time, rebuilding what had been broken, protecting what was left, and trying very hard not to wonder if the price of justice was worth what it cost. The first week after Ryan left was the quietest the house had been in years. No angry phone calls, no lawyers showing up unannounced, no dramatic confrontations in the driveway, just silence, thick and heavy, settling into every corner like dust. I threw myself into work because work was something I could control, something that made sense when nothing else did. Marcus came by on Wednesday with personnel files, everyone who'd been laid off during Ryan's tenure, everyone who'd quit in disgust, everyone who'd watched the company they loved get gutted and hadn't been able to stop it. We sat in what used to be Ryan's bedroom but was now my temporary office. The contractor's scheduled to start renovations next week. The room still smelled faintly of his cologne, and I hated that I noticed. hated that some part of me still registered his absence as a loss rather than a liberation. 47 people, Marcus said, spreading the files across the desk. These are the ones I think we need most. Engineers, designers, operations managers, people who knew how things actually worked before Ryan decided experience was expendable. I picked up the first file. Sarah Chen, senior mechanical engineer, 12 years with the company, laid off last October to streamline operations. Her exit interview noted she tried to warn Ryan about quality control issues with the new overseas manufacturer. He'd fired her for being resistant to change. Get her on the phone, I said. Today, if possible. Already did. She's waiting for your call. Marcus smiled. She said, and I quote, "About damn time someone with a brain took over again." She might be disappointed when she realizes how rusty my brain is. It's been 7 years since I was actively involved. You were never not involved, Evelyn. You just stopped getting credit for it. He was right, but hearing it out loud still felt strange. For so long I'd played the role of grieving widow, of diminished capacity, of someone too overwhelmed by loss to handle complex business decisions. And people had believed it because that's what they expected. A woman my age, after losing her husband, naturally would step back, naturally would let her son take over, naturally would fade into the background. Except I hadn't faded. I'd just been working in the shadows, protecting what David and I built, while letting Ryan think he was in charge. I called Sarah Chen first. She answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Mercer, please call me Evelyn. I understand Marcus spoke with you about returning to the company." There was a pause. Is this really happening? Because I've got to tell you, when he called, I thought it was a prank. Ryan made it pretty clear that people like me weren't welcome anymore. Ryan is no longer with the company, and yes, this is really happening. I'm rebuilding, properly this time, and I need people who actually care about quality and innovation instead of just quarterly profits. What happened? The rumors are wild. Everything from hostile takeover to embezzlement to you having Ryan committed for incompetence. I laughed, surprising myself. The truth is stranger than the rumors. But the short version is that Ryan tried to sell something he didn't own, and I'm taking back control of what was always mine. Good for you. Sarah's voice was fierce. That company was dying under his leadership. We all saw it happening, but none of us could stop it. Well, now we can. I'm offering you your old position back with a 20% salary increase and full authority to overhaul the quality control systems however you see fit. When do I start? How about Monday? I'll be there at 8. By the end of the day, I'd made 16 calls. 12 people said yes immediately. 3 needed time to think about it. 1 had moved to Seattle and was happy there, but gave me 3 referrals of other talented people Ryan had pushed out. It felt good, having a purpose beyond just surviving each day, having something to build instead of just something to protect. But then the sun would set, and the house would get quiet again, and I'd remember that I was doing all of this alone, that the person who should have been my partner in rebuilding was instead somewhere out there hating me for destroying his life. Thursday evening, Leon called. North Point's attorneys are moving forward with their lawsuit against Ryan. They're claiming intentional fraud and seeking full restitution plus damages. How much are they asking for? $78 million. They're saying the failed sale cost them opportunity losses and damaged their reputation. I did the math in my head. Ryan had maybe $5,000 left from what I'd given him. Even if he liquidated everything he owned, the condo, the car, whatever jewelry Vanessa hadn't taken, he might scrape together $200,000. He was so far underwater he'd never surface. They know he can't pay that, I said. Of course they know, but they're making an example of him, showing other would-be fraudsters what happens when you misrepresent assets in a corporate sale. He's going to be buried under this debt for the rest of his life. Leon was quiet for a moment. You could help him. Why would I do that? because he's still your son, because watching him drown might not feel as good as you think it will, because you have the resources to make this go away, and he doesn't. He tried to steal from me, Leon, and you stopped him. You won. The question now is whether you want revenge or whether you want resolution. I hung up without answering because I didn't know what I wanted anymore. The weekend dragged. I kept busy with contractor meetings for the office renovation, with financial planning sessions for the company relaunch, with anything that would keep my mind occupied. But Saturday night, alone in the house, I found myself in Ryan's old room again, sitting on the floor next to the boxes Maria had packed. I opened one at random. Trophies from Little League, debate teams, science fairs, programs from school plays where he'd had minor roles but had been so proud to be included. Birthday cards I'd written him over the years, full of encouragement and love and hopes for his future. Had I failed him? Had I been so focused on building the company with David that I'd neglected to build character in our son? Had we given him too much, expected too little, created a monster through our own permissiveness? Or was Ryan just someone who'd made his own choices and now had to live with the consequences? My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mom? Ryan's voice was rough, like he'd been crying, or drinking, or both. Ryan? I need help. The words came out broken, desperate. Vanessa's lawyer is taking everything, the condo, the car, even the watch Dad gave me for my 30th birthday. She's claiming I promised her a certain lifestyle and that I obtained the marriage through false pretenses. Did you? Did I what? Promise her a lifestyle you couldn't actually provide? Tell her you were worth more than you were? Silence. Then quietly. Yeah, I did. Then her lawyer has a case. You're really not going to help me. I gave you $5,000 and a path forward. What you do with that is up to you. $5,000 doesn't even cover a month's rent in this city. The hotels are kicking me out. I can't get a job because everyone in the industry knows what happened. And North Point's lawyers are calling me every day, threatening to garnish any wages I do manage to earn for the rest of my life. Sounds difficult. Sounds difficult? His voice rose. I'm about to be homeless, Mom. Completely broke, no prospects, no future, and you're sitting in that mansion acting like I deserve this. You tried to make me homeless first, remember? 6 months to find alternative housing while you sold my home out from under me. That was different. How? Explain to me how it's different. Because you had options. You have money, resources, people who could help you, and you don't. No, I don't, because you took everything from me. I took back what was mine. There's a difference. He was crying now. I could hear it. I'm your son. Doesn't that mean anything? It means I gave you a chance to make this right. It means I didn't press criminal charges for the embezzlement. It means I'm not actively destroying you. I'm just not saving you from your own choices. I'm going to lose everything. Good. Maybe then you'll understand what it felt like when you tried to take everything from me. He hung up, or I did, I wasn't sure which. I sat there holding the phone, my heart racing, tears on my face that I didn't remember crying. This was my child, my baby, and I just told him I was glad he was suffering. What kind of mother does that make me? But then I thought about his cold eyes when he'd slid those papers across the table. Thought about Vanessa's smirk. Thought about them discussing my future like I was a problem to be disposed of, and I knew I'd do it again. Sunday morning, I went to the company headquarters. The building was empty, peaceful in a way it never was during the week. I used my old access badge, which still worked, another thing Ryan had never bothered to check, and rode the elevator to the executive floor. David's old office was exactly as I remembered it. Ryan had taken the CEO suite on the other side of the building, something bigger and flashier, with floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture. But David's office remained, frozen in time like a museum exhibit. I sat in his chair and looked at the photographs on the wall. Our wedding day, the grand opening of our first factory, award ceremonies and business conferences, and all the moments that had built up to an empire. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, I said out loud to the empty room. To David's memory, to whatever part of him might still be listening. He's in trouble, real trouble, and I could help him, but if I do, he'll never learn. He'll just keep expecting to be rescued. The office was silent, of course. No ghostly wisdom, no divine intervention, just me and my guilt and the weight of decisions that had no good answers. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Sarah's already assembling a team. She's got 5 more people who want to come back. This is really happening, Evelyn. We're really going to rebuild this. I stared at that message for a long time. Then another text came through. This one from a number I didn't recognize. This is Jennifer Alcott, North Point's lead counsel. We need to speak with you regarding the Mercer sale. Please call at your earliest convenience. My stomach dropped. What did North Point want with me? I'd had nothing to do with Ryan's fraudulent sale, unless they were planning to sue everyone associated with the Mercer name, trying to recoup their losses however they could. I called Leon immediately. North Point's lawyers want to talk to me. I know. They contacted me this morning. Don't panic. They're not suing you. They want to propose something. Propose what? A solution. They paid $47 million for company assets that don't exist. But you control assets worth far more than that. They're wondering if there's a deal to be made. What kind of deal? The kind where they get something of actual value. You get partners with deep pockets and industry connections, and Ryan's fraudulent sale gets restructured into something legal. Why would I partner with people who are suing my son? Because they're suing your son either way. But if you work with them, you might be able to negotiate terms that don't completely bury him, and you'd get capital and connections that would make the company rebuild go a lot faster. I thought about that, about the irony of Ryan's attempted betrayal, potentially becoming the catalyst for something bigger and better than what we'd had before. Set up a meeting, I said, but I'm not making any promises. Understood. I'll arrange something for this week. After I hung up, I sat in David's chair for another hour, thinking about paths forward and bridges burned, and whether there was any way to rebuild a relationship with my son that didn't involve enabling his worst impulses. I didn't have an answer, but I was starting to think that maybe not having an answer was okay. Maybe some things had to stay broken for a while before you could figure out how to fix them properly. Monday morning felt like the first day of something new. Sarah showed up at 7:45, beat me to the office by 15 minutes, and had already made coffee by the time I arrived. Couldn't sleep, she admitted. Too excited, too nervous, little bit terrified that this is all going to fall apart. You and me both. We spent the morning going through operational plans, identifying what needed immediate attention versus what could wait. By lunch, 3 more of the people I'd called had confirmed they were coming back. By 3 o'clock, Sarah had drafted a complete overhaul of the quality control protocols. This is going to take time, she warned. We can't just flip a switch and undo 3 years of damage. I know, but at least we're moving in the right direction. That evening, Jennifer Alcott from North Point came to my house. Leon was with me, along with Patricia, creating a wall of professional support that made me feel slightly less like I was walking into an ambush. Jennifer was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She declined coffee and got straight to business. Mrs. Mercer, North Point invested $47 million in what we believed was a comprehensive acquisition of Mercer Industries. Your son represented the sale as including all operational assets, intellectual property, and revenue-generating contracts. We've since discovered that was false. I'm aware. We've also discovered that you control the actual assets through a private trust structure, assets worth conservatively $300 million. Also aware. Jennifer leaned forward. We're not interested in a protracted legal battle with a family in crisis. We're interested in a legitimate business opportunity. So here's what we're proposing, a partnership. North Point provides capital and operational support for a comprehensive company relaunch. You maintain majority ownership and final decision-making authority. We get a fair equity stake and seats on the board. And Ryan? That's the complicated part. We're willing to restructure the lawsuit if you're willing to restructure the deal he made. Instead of a $47 million fraudulent sale, we turn it into a $47 million investment in the revitalized company. Ryan gets immunity from the fraud charges. We get actual assets, and you get partners who can help take the company global. Leon had warned me this was coming, but hearing it out loud still felt surreal. You want me to bail out my son after everything he did. We want to solve a business problem in a way that benefits everyone. What happened between you and your son is family drama. What we're talking about is a corporate restructure that happens to resolve that drama as a side effect. I looked at Leon. He gave me a small nod that said it was a legitimate offer worth considering. I need to think about it, I said. Of course, but Mrs. Mercer, you should know that if we don't reach an agreement, we will pursue the lawsuit against your son to its fullest extent. We will garnish his wages, seize his assets, and make sure that everyone in the business world knows what he did. He'll never work in this industry again. Is that a threat? It's a reality. We're offering you a way to save him from that, but the window for negotiation is limited. After she left, I sat with Leon and Patricia in the living room trying to process what had just happened. They're basically asking you to forgive Ryan and give him a second chance, Patricia said bluntly. Wrapped up in corporate language, but that's what it amounts to. Except it's not forgiveness, Leon corrected. It's a business decision that happens to benefit him. You'd still maintain control. He'd still face consequences. But those consequences wouldn't include complete financial destruction. Why do I feel like I'm being manipulated into rescuing him? Because you are, Patricia said, but that doesn't make it the wrong decision. I went to bed that night without deciding anything. But around 2 a.m, I got another text from Ryan. The hotel is kicking me out tomorrow. I've called everyone I know. No one will help me. Not friends, not business contacts, not even Vanessa's family. I'm out of options. I stared at that message in the dark. Tried to feel something other than this exhausted sadness. Another text. I know I don't deserve your help. I know I destroyed any right to ask you for anything. But I'm asking anyway. Please, I have nowhere else to go. I thought about David, about what he would do in this situation. He'd always believed in second chances, in rehabilitation over punishment, in the possibility that people could change if given the right motivation. But he'd also been clear about consequences, about accountability, about not enabling behavior that hurt other people. What would he want me to do now? I typed out a response, deleted it, typed another one, deleted that too. Finally, I just wrote, "Come to the house tomorrow at 10, we need to talk." His response was immediate, thank you, I'll be there." I turned off my phone and lay in the dark, wondering if I'd just made a terrible mistake or taken the first step towards something that might eventually resemble forgiveness. Either way, tomorrow would tell. Ryan showed up at 9:45 the next morning, 15 minutes early, which told me exactly how desperate he was. I watched from the upstairs window as he got out of a beat-up Honda Civic that definitely wasn't his. Probably a rental, the cheapest one available. His clothes were wrinkled, the same outfit he'd worn 3 days ago, and he carried nothing but his phone. When I opened the door, the difference in him was startling. The arrogant executive who'd strutted in here 2 weeks ago was gone. In his place stood someone who looked like he hadn't slept in days, hadn't eaten much either, and was running on nothing but fear and desperation. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, and his voice cracked on the last word. I stepped aside to let him in. He walked past me into the entrance hall and just stood there, looking around like he was seeing the house for the first time. Or maybe seeing it as something he'd lost rather than something he was entitled to. "Kitchen," I said. I made coffee. We sat at the same table where this whole nightmare had started. I poured 2 cups, slid one across to him. His hands shook when he picked it up. "I'm going to talk," I said, "and you're going to listen. No interrupting, no defending yourself, no explanations. Just listen. Can you do that?" He nodded. "I got a visit yesterday from North Point's lawyers. They're offering a deal that would save you from complete financial destruction, a partnership that restructures your fraudulent sale into a legitimate investment, gives you immunity from prosecution, and lets you walk away with your life mostly intact. Hope flickered in his eyes. Really? I'm not finished. The deal requires me to partner with people I don't know, give up a portion of control over a company I've protected for years, and basically use my resources to bail you out of a mess you created. So before I even consider it, I need you to answer one question honestly. And Ryan, if you lie to me right now, we're done forever. Do you understand? Yes. Why did you really do it? Not the surface reasons about the company struggling or Vanessa's expectations or wanting to prove yourself. The real reason. Why did you try to destroy me? He stared into his coffee for a long time. I waited, watching the war play out on his face. The temptation to lie, to spin it, to make himself look better, fighting against what might have been the first honest impulse he'd had in years. Because I was jealous, he finally said, so quietly I almost didn't hear him. Of you and Dad. Of the way he looked at you like you were the most extraordinary person in the world. Of how he'd ask your opinion on everything, trust your judgment over everyone else's, give you credit for ideas that I thought, that I wanted to believe were his. You were jealous of your parents' marriage. I was jealous that he saw you as an equal when he only ever saw me as a disappointment. Even when he was proud of me, it was that surprise kind of proud, like he couldn't quite believe I'd managed to do something right. The honesty of it hurt more than any lie would have. So you decided to tear down what we built together. I decided to prove I could be as smart as you, as capable, as worthy of respect. And when I realized I couldn't actually build anything as good as what you'd already created, I figured I'd just take it instead, make people think I was the one who'd been in charge all along, even if it meant destroying me in the process. I told myself you'd be fine, that you had more than enough money to be comfortable, that you didn't need this big house or the company or any of it. I convinced myself I was doing you a favor, honestly, setting you free from all this responsibility. You convinced yourself I was a burden. He flinched. Yeah, I did, because it was easier than admitting I was trying to steal from my own mother. I took a sip of coffee, buying time to process what he'd just said. This was the truth I'd been looking for, not the polite fiction about business decisions or the defensive rationalizations about my well-being. Just raw, ugly honesty about envy and entitlement, and a son who'd spent his whole life feeling like he lived in his parents' shadow. Your father loved you, I said quietly. He was hard on you because he saw potential you weren't living up to, but he loved you. I know, I do know that, but knowing it and feeling it are different things. And me, did you ever love me, or was I always just an obstacle to what you thought you deserved? Ryan's face crumpled. I loved you, I love you. That's what makes this so messed up. I love you, and I still try to destroy you because I wanted what you had more than I valued who you are. There it was, the admission that made everything both better and worse at the same time. North Point's deal has conditions, I said, beyond the corporate restructuring, personal conditions for you. I'll do anything. Don't say that until you hear what they are. First, you work for the company again, but not as an executive. You start at the bottom. Quality control, operations, manufacturing floor, wherever Sarah Chen thinks you need to learn what this business actually is. Sarah Chen is back? Sarah Chen is back, along with 15 other people you fired or drove away. People who know more about this company than you ever bothered to learn. And you're going to work under them, take orders from them, and learn from them. No executive parking spot, no corner office, no assistant. You'll earn minimum wage for the first 6 months. His face went pale. Minimum wage? I can't live on that. You'll live here, in your old bedroom, under my roof, under my rules. No car. You'll take the bus to work like everyone else who can't afford better. No eating out, no luxury purchases, no going back to the lifestyle you think you're entitled to. For how long? Until you prove you understand what work actually is. until the people you fired tell me you've earned their respect, until you can look me in the eyes and honestly say you understand why what you did was wrong, not just because you got caught, but because it was wrong. Ryan sat there processing, and I could see him calculating whether he could survive those conditions, or whether his pride would rather let him be destroyed than accept such a humiliating come down. "What if I say no?" he finally asked. "Then North Point sues you into oblivion. You'll spend the next 30 years paying off a debt you'll never escape, and you'll do it without any help from me. You'll be 43 years old with no job, no references, no prospects, and a reputation that makes you unemployable in any industry where people check backgrounds. That's not really a choice." "No, it's not. But I'm giving you one anyway, because unlike you, I'm not interested in watching my child suffer just to prove a point. I'm interested in whether you're capable of becoming someone worth saving." He was crying now, not bothering to hide it. "I don't know if I can do it. Live like that, work like that, become the kind of person you're describing. Then don't accept the deal. Walk away right now. I'll survive. The company will survive. The only person who won't survive is you. Why are you doing this? After everything I did, why are you giving me this chance?" I thought about that question, about all the possible answers I could give, about love and duty and the fact that he was my only child, about David's belief in redemption and second chances, about the part of me that would always see him as the little boy who needed his mother, no matter how badly the man he'd become had hurt me. But I gave him the truth instead. Because I'm tired of fighting. Because destroying you won't undo what you did to me. Because if I spend the rest of my life punishing you, the only person who really suffers is me. This isn't about forgiveness, Ryan. This is about practicality. You're a problem that needs solving, and this is the most efficient solution. He looked at me with something that might have been disappointment, like he'd wanted a declaration of maternal love instead of cold business logic. "I thought you'd say it was because you love me." "I do love you, but love isn't enough anymore. Love is what let you hurt me in the first place, because I loved you too much to see what you were becoming. What I'm offering now isn't love, it's structure, consequences. The kind of boundaries I should have set years ago before you started believing that being my son meant you could take whatever you wanted." Ryan wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "When do I start?" "Today. Right now. Maria's already made up your room. Your work schedule starts tomorrow morning at 6. Sarah will pick you up at 5:30. 5:30 in the morning? That's when the manufacturing floor starts. You'll work an 8-hour shift, come home, have dinner with me, and we'll talk about what you learned every single day. No exceptions. What about weekends? You'll spend weekends studying operations manuals, quality control protocols, everything you were too arrogant to learn when you were busy calling yourself CEO. Leon's already prepared the curriculum. He looked around the kitchen like he was seeing a prison instead of his childhood home. This is going to be hell. No, hell is what you tried to condemn me to. This is just hard work and accountability. There's a difference. I stood up. Your room is ready. You have an hour to settle in. Then I want you back down here. Marcus is coming over with the employee handbook and your first assignments. Ryan stood too, unsteady on his feet. Mom? What? I really am sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know I mean it. Sorry is just words, Ryan. Show me with actions. Prove you're capable of being someone other than the person who tried to destroy me. Then maybe someday your apology will mean something. He went upstairs and I heard his footsteps on the landing, heard the door to his old room open and close, heard the sound of someone confronting the ruins of their own choices. Maria came in from the garden where she'd been giving us privacy. You're really letting him stay? I'm really making him earn his way back. There's a difference. Mr. David would approve. He always said consequences were the only real teacher. David would probably think I'm being too soft. He wanted to cut Ryan off completely after the car incident in college. And you talked him out of it because you saw potential everyone else missed. Maybe you still do. I didn't know if that was true. What I saw in Ryan right now wasn't potential, it was wreckage. But wreckage could be rebuilt if the foundation was still solid. The question was whether Ryan had any foundation left or if he was just rubble all the way down. The next 6 months were harder than anything I'd done since David died. Harder than grieving, harder than rebuilding the company, harder than facing down my own son's betrayal. Because this required daily patience, daily boundary setting, daily resistance to the urge to just make it easier for him. Ryan struggled. Of course he struggled. The first week he showed up late twice and Sarah sent him home without pay. The second week he mouthed off to a line supervisor who'd been with the company for 20 years and got written up. The third week he tried to skip the bus and call a car service, and I made him walk the 4 miles to work in the rain. But slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice it happening, something started to shift. He stopped complaining about the early mornings, started asking questions instead of assuming he knew better, came home with grease under his fingernails and pride in his voice when he talked about fixing a machine that had been down for 2 days. One night, about 3 months in, we were having dinner, the mandatory nightly meal where we discussed what he'd learned, and he said something that stopped me mid-bite. I never knew how much Dad actually knew about the manufacturing process. I thought he just shook hands and made deals. But today, one of the engineers was talking about a modification Dad designed back in 2003 that's still the most efficient solution anyone's come up with. And I realized I never even asked him about his work, never cared enough to learn what made him good at it. He wanted to teach you, you weren't interested. I was interested in the money and the status, not the actual work. That's why I failed so badly at running things. I thought being CEO meant telling people what to do. I didn't understand it meant understanding every single part of the operation well enough to make informed decisions. Are you understanding it now? I'm starting to. Sarah's got me rotating through every department. Last week I was in shipping, this week I'm in quality control, next week I'll be in R&D. And every department has people who remember Dad, who tell me stories about how he'd show up unannounced to see how things actually worked instead of just reading reports. He believed you couldn't lead what you didn't understand. I'm beginning to see why. Progress wasn't linear. There were setbacks. A particularly bad day when he came home furious that a 26-year-old engineer had corrected his mistake in front of the whole team. A week where he got sick and wanted to call out, but I made him go to work anyway because hourly employees don't get unlimited sick days. A moment when he saw his old college friends posting vacation photos on social media and had a complete breakdown about how unfair his life had become. But he kept showing up, kept working, kept learning. The North Point partnership went through officially in month 4. Jennifer Alcott came to the office for the signing, and Ryan was there too, not as a party to the agreement, but as the quality control associate who brought coffee for the meeting. Jennifer looked at him, looked at me, and said, "This is either the strangest redemption arc I've ever seen or the most elaborate form of parental revenge." "Can't it be both?" I asked. By month 6, something had fundamentally changed in Ryan. He'd lost weight, gained muscle from the physical labor. His eyes were clearer. His voice was steadier. He didn't carry himself with that false confidence anymore, the bravado of someone pretending to be important. Instead, he moved like someone who knew his value because he'd earned it. Sarah came to me on a Tuesday. "He's ready." Ready for what? To be more than an hourly worker. "He's good, Evelyn. Really good. He's got instincts I didn't expect. Sees problems before they become critical. Understands the systems in a way that takes most people years to develop. He's earned a promotion." What are you thinking? Junior operations manager. He'd still have supervision, still have accountability, but he'd have some autonomy, some responsibility that matters. What does the team think? They voted on it, 16-2 in favor. The 2 against weren't personal. They just want to see more time before he gets any authority. But the rest, they believe he's changed. I called Ryan into my office that evening. He came in still wearing his work uniform, still smelling faintly of machine oil and effort. Sarah says you've earned a promotion. His face lit up, then immediately shuttered like he was afraid to hope. Yeah? Junior operations manager, salary position, small office, 2 direct reports, real responsibility. When? Next Monday. But Ryan, hear me clearly, this isn't a gift. This is earned, and it can be unearned just as quickly if you forget the lessons of the last 6 months. I won't forget. I can't forget. Every time I think about slipping back into old habits, I remember what it felt like to have nothing, to be nothing. You were never nothing. You just had to learn the difference between being someone and appearing to be someone. He sat down across from my desk. The desk that used to be David's, that used to be Ryan's during his failed tenure as CEO. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. Do you forgive me for what I tried to do? I'd known this question was coming eventually, had practiced different answers in my head, but sitting there looking at my son, really seeing him maybe for the first time in years, I found I didn't need the practiced response. I'm getting there. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip, Ryan. It's a process. Some days I look at you and all I see is the person who tried to destroy me. Other days I see the man you're becoming and I feel proud. Both things can be true at the same time. That's fair. More than fair, actually. Your father used to say that trust is built in drops and lost in buckets. You lost buckets. Now you're rebuilding drops. It takes time. I've got time. I'm not going anywhere. And he didn't. Ryan stayed. Worked. Learned. Grew. A year after he tried to sell the company out from under me, he was running the operations division with a competence that surprised everyone, including himself. 2 years after, he'd rebuilt relationships with most of the people he'd fired or hurt. 3 years after, he walked into my office with a proposal for expanding into sustainable manufacturing that showed genuine innovation and strategic thinking. This is good, I said, reading through his presentation. Really good. Your father would have loved this. I wish I could show it to him, tell him I finally get it. He knows. Wherever he is, he knows. The company thrived. The North Point partnership brought capital and connections that let us expand globally. Sarah's quality overhauls won industry awards. Marcus retired happy, knowing the company was in good hands. And I stepped into the role I'd hidden from for so long, not as the widow of the founder, not as the silent partner, but as the CEO, and driving force behind an empire I'd helped build and had fought to protect. People ask me sometimes if I regretted how harshly I treated Ryan, if I thought there might have been an easier way to teach him those lessons, and my answer was always the same. Easy lessons don't stick. Ryan needed to lose everything to understand what everything meant, needed to build from the bottom to appreciate what the top actually required, needed to face real consequences to develop real character. Did I enjoy watching my son suffer? No, but I didn't regret it either, because the alternative was enabling him into complete destruction, watching him become someone beyond redemption, and spending the rest of my life mourning the person he could have been if someone had loved him enough to set boundaries. The real turning point came 4 years after that morning when I told Ryan he could stay under my conditions. We were at the annual company dinner, something David had started decades ago as a way to celebrate the people who made everything possible. Ryan was scheduled to give a speech about the operations division's achievements. I watched him take the stage, confident but not arrogant, prepared but not scripted. And he started talking, not about profit margins or efficiency metrics, but about what he'd learned from the people in the room, named specific employees who'd taught him specific lessons, thanked the line workers who'd corrected his mistakes, the engineers who'd patiently explained concepts he'd been too proud to ask about, the supervisors who'd held him accountable when he wanted to cut corners. Then he looked at me. Most of you know my story, how I tried to destroy this company out of arrogance and greed. How my mother stopped me and then offered me something I didn't deserve, a chance to earn my way back. 4 years ago, I thought I understood what success looked like. titles, money, power. I thought I'd already made it because of who my father was and what my name meant. He paused, and I saw emotion flicker across his face. But I was wrong about everything. Success isn't what you take, it's what you build. It's not about your title, it's about whether you've earned the respect of the people you work with. And it's definitely not about inheritance. My father's greatest success wasn't this company. It was recognizing how extraordinary my mother was and trusting her to help build something that mattered. And my mother's greatest success wasn't protecting the company from my attempt to steal it. It was protecting me from becoming someone who wasn't worth saving. I felt tears on my face and didn't bother wiping them away. Ryan stepped down from the stage and walked over to where I was sitting. In front of 400 employees, he knelt down beside my chair. "I'm sorry, Mom, for all of it, for not seeing you, for not valuing you, for thinking I could ever be better than you instead of learning from you. Thank you for loving me enough to let me fail. And thank you for giving me the chance to try again." I pulled him up and hugged him, the son who tried to destroy me and had instead destroyed only the worst parts of himself. "You're welcome. Now get back to work. You've got that sustainability proposal to finish." He laughed through his own tears. "Yes, ma'am." The party continued around us, but I slipped outside to the garden where David and I used to walk on summer evenings. The night was clear, stars visible even through the city lights. "We did it," I whispered to whatever remained of David in the universe. It was messy and painful, and I wasn't sure we'd make it, but we did it. I felt no ghostly presence, heard no otherworldly response, but I didn't need one, because I could see the evidence all around me, in the company we'd rebuilt, in the son we'd managed to save, in the life I'd fought to protect and had emerged from the battle stronger than I'd ever been. Love wasn't enough on its own. It never had been. But love combined with boundaries, with consequences, with the willingness to let people fail so they could learn to succeed, that was something powerful, something lasting. And standing there in the garden under the stars, I finally understood what David had been trying to tell me all those years ago when he'd said I was the strongest person he'd ever known. He'd seen something in me I hadn't seen in myself. The strength to protect what mattered, the courage to fight back against betrayal, the wisdom to know when punishment was necessary and when redemption was possible. I wasn't perfect. I'd made mistakes. There were moments I'd been too harsh, moments I'd been too soft, moments I'd second-guessed every decision, but I'd survived. More than survived, I'd won. Not because I'd destroyed my enemies or amassed more wealth or proven I was smarter than everyone else. I'd won because I'd refused to let anyone, not even my own son, define my worth based on their needs instead of my value. I'd won because I'd set boundaries and held them even when it hurt. I'd won because I'd loved myself enough to demand respect and had been willing to stand alone when that respect wasn't freely given. And in the end, that was worth more than any empire, any inheritance, any legacy written in corporate records. I walked back inside to rejoin the celebration, to the company I'd built and the people who valued me, to the son who'd finally learned what his mother had always been, not a burden to be discarded, but a force to be reckoned with. And I smiled because for the first time in years I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving.